Hello everybody, my name is Horizon and I'm doing a kind of a different deck profile for today. It's not really going to be meta or road. This is more of my personal own creation or amalgamation of cards that I call a deck. And I honestly just call it flip dot deck. But to really get this started, I wanted to kind of pause on the live duels that I've been uploading for the past couple of days and do something a little bit different. But I'll be uploading more live duels. Then, just as we're recording right now, one of the live duels is actually rendering right now, so kind of wanted to do something right off the bat. So you'll kind of see these in frequently, it's really just to apologize for not uploading for so long. But enough of me rambling about the uploading schedule and stuff. I want to talk about my I call it KTSS, Krawler, Tindangle, Subterror, Shaddoll. And we'll start off, I guess, backwards with it. So first starter for the first S would be Subterror. So 2 copies of Subterror Guru. It's honestly a good card, but I couldn't find enough room to put a 3rd copy in. This just allows you to search for any Subterror card, but also have the Book of Moon effect to get more monsters or just get more disruption, because this deck kind of doesn't have a lot of disruption. But for the next monster is 2 of the hand trap, my only hand trap, Subterror Fiendus. Honestly, it's actually a really good effect. I'm more used to recovery than the actual negation effect, because I have really a hard time actually putting Guru onto the field because it's a 60 card deck. It's very bulky and you're not going to be able to see Guru all the time. But moving on to the spells, because the Subterror monster lineup, 2 copies of Hidden City. I wish I could put a 3rd copy in to actually get more consistency, but I just don't have enough room. I'm literally at 60 cards and I don't know what to cut. But this card's really good just because it really helps Subterrors out for its effects. To add on activation, add a Subterror card or add a Subterror monster, flip a Subterror monster, and then also negate an attack by flipping a Subterror monster. It just does everything for the archetype, and it's just a really good card. Then 1 copy of Final Battle for the traps. Honestly, I was originally playing 2 copies of this, but I realized it was more of a brick because I don't see a lot of the Subterror cards. So I trimmed it down to 1 for the ability, because I can search it with Guru, and I'm able to search Guru quite consistently because of its monster lineup in this deck. But everyone knows what Final Battle does. It has 4 effects. Flip a monster, book a monster. On you, flip a Subterror, book a Subterror, Subterror monster gain the attack, and can't negate Subterror cards. Then the next would be Subterror Secession. I played 3 copies of this just because it's really good for its effect. Because no one probably knows what this card does, I will explain what it does. The first effect is what I use typically, is to send a flip monster, or send a monster from the face of field or hand to the graveyard to add 1 flip monster with the same attribute. So typically what I'll be doing is sending Shaddoll monsters from my hand to the graveyard, or from fields to graveyard to trigger their effects to add other monsters from other archetypes. So typically I'll send Shaddolls to add Tindangles, or I'll send Krawler monsters to add Subterrors, and vice versa, to get advantage for next turn and be able to get what I need for my next turn. So this is really good because all Subterror traps, at least ones in this deck, can flip themselves face down, so I don't have to worry about them going to the grave because they're not sacky 1-ofs. But that's it for the Subterror portion of the deck. Moving on to Shaddolls. For starters, we play 3 copies of Shaddoll Windy, or Shaddoll Windy. Honestly, this is a really good card that came out in the structure deck, and it's just so amazing what she does when she's flipped special summon a Shaddoll monster from the deck in face up or face down position, or when she sends the graveyard special summon a Shaddoll monster in face down defense position. This is really good just because I have an interesting combo that I use with her to get my advantage, and it's kind of, I'll show you a little bit at the end of the video on the combo I use, because that's kind of the linear strategy that this deck does, but the Shaddolls really give versatility on what you do with that strategy. But anyway, moving on to the next monsters, I play 2 Squidmata for the ability to send Shaddoll cards to the graveyard, 2 Hedgehog for the ability to add Shaddoll cards or Shaddoll monsters, 1 copy of Aikilos to have the effect when it's flipped, special summon Shaddoll monster from my hand, or when sent to the graveyard to pitch a Shaddoll from my hand to boost all my monsters by the attack of its level times 100. Then 1 copy of Dragon for the spell and trap pop, and also its flip effect to bounce. 1 Aerial, the special summon Shaddoll banish because of Regional Incarnation banishes monsters, and I typically banish Squidmata, so I can get monsters back if people banish it or if I banish it. 1 Falco because of the tuner also revives. And also this has a triple DD Crow effect, but I don't use that often because I'm not really fighting a lot of graveyard centric decks. 1 Beast for the draw power. And then moving on to the spells. 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion. This card is amazing. Typically this is a go second build, but I can also go first. But I'll show you, but this is typically you want to see in your hand always. This is your kind of your primary starter, and most of your Shaddolls you want to see Windy first or Shaddoll Fusion because of the fact that Windy helps you out so much, because of the fact that when you set a card and pass, you're not going to be really doing much. You're waiting for your opponent either to attack your set card or blow it up. So typically you're going to want a Shaddoll monster like Falco or Windy to protect yourself from being murdered that turn. But lastly, the Shaddoll monsters, or Shaddoll cards, more accurately, 2 copies of Shaddoll Reincarnation. This has an interesting effect. This is also a really good card that came out in the support. You can activate, it's a trap card, or activate the trap by special summoning a Shaddoll monster in face up or face down defense position. Or while it's in the graveyard, you can banish a Shaddoll monster to target a face down card, or target a set monster, flip it face up, or target a monster and flip it face down. That's really good just because it allows you to play with flip effects during your opponent's turn and gives you a little bit more of a disruption. But that's the end for Shaddolls. Moving on to Crawlers. For starters, I play 2 copies of Krawler Spine for the pop effect, and then every single Krawler monster except Daisy's X Krawler has the effect of when this face-up card is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's, or leaves the field piece of the opponent's card effect, they'll special up to 2 more Crawlers from the deck in face-down defense with different names. This is a really good effect for all Crawlers, but it's kind of hard to put them on because they have to be this face-up card. If they didn't have that restriction, this would be a lot better. This would be a lot better archetype, just for the ability just to float constantly. For this reason, I only play 2 Spine just for its typically just is big stats of 22 defense, and it's just a level 2 insect. But nextly, 3 copies of Dendrite. Dendrite's actually a really good card, and my friend who was playing, was playing Krawler Shaddoll. That's honestly really good because of the synergy of Dendrite. Dendrite just has that flip effect when it's flipped. Send 1 monster to the graveyard. That's it. Send 1 monster to the graveyard. So you can send anything that you need to the graveyard to get that thing. So I can send a Tindangle, I can send a Shaddoll, I can send another Krawler monster, but typically I'm going to be sending Shaddoll monsters because you kind of want the Shaddolls to go off get their effects for the versatility of this deck, and it has a typical Krawler effect. Next, 2 copies of Axon. Axon is just a spell and trap pop, so it's like Spine that would, instead of popping a monster, it's going to pop a spell and trap. Then it has the standard Krawler effect. That's the only reason why I play it. And lastly, 1 Daisy's X Krawler for the skill drain, and also it has another effect to search a level 9 monster, but that effect will never come up because I'm not playing another level 9 that is a level 9 in other than Earth. So I will never ever get that effect go off. So this just skill drain effect, and that's really all you need to know about it. Next, I play, for spells of Crawlers, I play World Legacy Survivor. This is an interesting card because I have to exit the top 5 cards of my deck, add 1 Krawler or World Legacy card to my hand, and add Survivor, and then mill the rest if you add a World Legacy or Krawler monster. So typically what you want is to get like a Spine or like a Krawler or something, or maybe like a World Legacy, maybe like World Legacy Pawn, add that, and then mill the rest of the Crawlers or the Shaddolls or the Tindangle monsters to the graveyard. And that's typically the thing. The one restriction you have is for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, you're locked in link summoning. You cannot special summon from the deck except link monsters. So that is the one issue because it kind of restricts the Shaddoll engine. So moving on from spells to traps, 3 copies of World Legacy Pawn. This is a staple in any flip deck. For its effect to target a monster on the field, flip it face up, and so that's about it. And then the second effect is shuffle a Krawler to flip a monster face down. It's really just for the flip effect, and it's nothing else. And then lastly, for my one last trap, World Legacy Mind Melt to change the effect of a monster while I control a Krawler to a compulse. So it'll just bounce a Krawler to trigger the Krawler effects to add a self. Typically, if I open this in a Krawler monster, I'm going to normal summon the Krawler and set this. And hopefully they don't blow my back row. It also has the second effect of targeting a link monster on the field, special summon a Krawler monster to a zone a link monster points to. So typically, if they point like a link 3, like with decode arrows, you can target that decode and special summon a Krawler from the deck. So it's not a bad effect, but it's rare. It's rare that it comes up. Next, for the Tindangles, 3 copies of Tindangle Angel. This is a very interesting because I'm probably have to read all these effects because no one knows what Tindangles do. Angel has the effect of when a monster is special or when it's flipped, special summon a flip monster from the hand or graveyard face down, and if this effect was activated during the opponent's battle phase, you can end the battle phase. This is a really good effect just because you can special summon any Krawler, any Shaddoll, any Subterror, or any Tindangle monster from the hand or graveyard to either recover or to extend your playability. But enough of me rambling about Angel. We play 1 Tindangle Trude, 1 Tindangle Trinity, and 2 Garudia. Garudia is just for Trinity. Trinity special when it's flipped, special summon Garudia. Again, Garudia has the effect of while you control a set, you can special summon this card, and then a second effect of when a monster when your opponent normal or special summons a monster from the hand, or normal special summons a monster to a zone and is now pointing to a link monster, you can activate this effect, tribute, and special summon a Tindangle monster from the deck or hand in either face up or face down defense position. And then Trinity just has the flip effect to special summon this guy from the deck, and then Tindangle monsters can't be destroyed by battle. And then it has a third effect that never going to come up because I don't play the trap. And then next, 2 copies of Intruder. Intruder is an interesting card just because it allows you, when it's flipped, to add a Tindangle monster from deck to hand. And then when it's normal summon, you can send a Tindangle card to the graveyard. And then last effect, because most Tindangles have 3 effects, is when it's sent to while it's in the graveyard and when a monster is special summon face down defense position, you can special summon this card from the graveyard back to the field. But this effect is mandatory, so you have to activate it. It's not optional. It literally says this is not an optional effect. And then lastly, for the Tindangle monsters, 1 Tindangle Hound. I honestly believe this is the best monster in the Tindangle. Well, not best monster in Tindangle archetype. It's just the best monster in the deck for beating people down. So it has 3 effects. When it's flipped, target up monster, gain the attack on that monster's original attack, and then flip it face down. Its second effect, while an opponent's monster is linked, it loses 1,000 attack. And then lastly, if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, target 1 face down card or 1 face down set monster you control, flip it face up. Moving on to the traps, because I only play 2 traps in this, is 2 Tindangle Denene. The first effect you'll probably never get off, and honestly you want this more in the graveyard than on field. So this is more of a garnet. If you add it to your hand, you kind of want to send it to the graveyard. So its first effect is when you take damage from an opponent's attacking monster, while you have 3 or more Tindangle monsters in the graveyard with different names, special summon one acute a Cerberus from your extra deck to the extra deck monster zone, then destroy. And if you do, destroy that monster. And the second effect is more of the soul charge effect that I like. While you control no monster in the extra deck monster zone, special summon, banish this card from the graveyards, target 3 Tindangle monsters with different names, special summon them, and face down defense position. That's really good for the end phase, banish, protect yourself, or battle phase, banish, protect yourself. But that was the end for the Tindangle, Subterror, Shaddoll, and Krawler monsters. Moving on to more of the generic flip monsters, you play 1 copy of Pot of Forbidden. I don't care what deck you're playing. If you're playing a flip deck, you must play Pot of Forbidden. It is really good for its ability to either draw 2, return all spells and traps to the hand, destroy a monster your opponent controls, or look at your opponent's hand, shuffle 1 card in the deck. That is 3 banned effects and 1 limited effect. Pot of Greed, Forceful Sentry, or Hatronade On top of that, it has a Regeki effect. This is really good because you can juggle flipping this up and flipping these down because of how many cards you play in this deck. Next, I play Apprentice Piper, 3 copies, because of its effect of when it's flipped, special summon a monster from your hand. And then when it's destroyed, special summon a monster from your hand. So typically you're going to set this card, they attack it if they can, flip it, special summon a monster from your hand, and then when it's destroyed, special summon a monster from your hand. You got 2 new monsters onto the field from the price of 1. And lastly, for the 60 cards, is 3 copies of Junk Sleep. When your opponent normal or special summons a monster, flip all monster you control to face up attack position. And then during the end phase, flip them all face down. Flip every single monster you control face down. This is really good just because it's a little bit more reactive like Pollen, but it's just another way to get monsters flipped up and get their flip effects applied. But that was the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, I play 1 copy of Omega for the ability to recur because Falco is a tuner and typically you're going to want Intruder. And I'll show you a little bit of a combo to get Omega on. I can't get it on first turn, but I'm still trying to work on this deck. I've been working on this deck for a year and there's still a lot of kinks to it. So Omega is really just a way to return banished Shaddoll monster to the graveyard off or banish incarnations to the graveyard to get your effects to pop off. Next, for the Shaddoll lineup, 1 Winda, 1 Shuganaga, 2 Construct or L Construct, and 2 Apcolone. This is your kind of your lineup. You're typically making this off Shaddoll Fusion, making this off Shaddoll Construct, not L Shaddoll Construct, the Link monster, you know, the bad one. And then Shuganaga is because you have Crawlers and Subterror monsters, they're all low earth, and then Tindangles are dark, so you can make Winda to lock your opponent out. And this is just for the adding, and this is for the sending and popping monsters. Next, 2 copies of Acute Acerberus because you have 2 of the Tindangle Delene, so you kind of want your targets if you have that chance to resolve. This is a card you'll never see. But here is your main boss monster. Typically, you're going to be wanting to summon this all the time. It's Subterror Behemoth Fiendus. This is a Link 2 Worm Earth monster with 2000 attack, and it requires 2 flip monsters to make this. While this card's on the field, you can activate its effect to send a flip monster to the graveyard. This is a part of the effect, so your opponent can't ash this. To special summon a flip monster from your hand. So typically you're going to send a a Shaddoll monster to the graveyard to special summon a flip monster from the hand. This is really good just because of its what would be versatility? No, just I don't know what it's called. Just the ability, just for its versatility of putting out any flip monster. So it can literally target any flip monster and send any flip monster. So that is your main. Then it also has a second effect that I forgot to mention. That when a monster is flipped to an arrow it points to, add 1 flip monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. So either you can add something to your hand like Guru, or add something in your graveyard back to your hand. Moving on to the final monsters, I play 2 copies of Shaddoll Construct for the kind of Shaddoll Fusion type effect. It doesn't use monsters from the deck, but uses from hand and field to fusion summon, so it's not a bad card. And then 1 copy of Cross Sheep, or it's just a generic one, and then Krawler Nergos for its ability to make monsters it points to attack twice. But I'm going to replace this with Lib the Keymaster for the ability to set World Legacy Pawn from the deck while you control a World Legacy monster in your graveyard. And also it's a generic Link too, if you're playing World Legacies. But that's the extra deck. Moving on to the side deck, I play 3 copies of whatever her name is. I can't pronounce it, so I'm not even going to attempt to try. But her effect is, while the cards in the hand or graveyard, target a monster you control and your opponent's monster your opponent controls. Flip them both face down and then special summon this card, but banish it, it leaves the field. So typically it's just a way to book more monsters, and that's the only reason why it plays. It's a good card, came out Echo. Then 2 copies of Primordial Calling. This is not a flip monster, but it is a good monster. When your opponent special summons a monster, special summon this card face down defense position. And then when this card is flipped face up, you can target 2 cards your opponent controls, destroy them. Or is it monster? This is a new addition to the side deck. Yeah, this card can't be monster. Must be special summon by. Yeah, if a monster is sent from your opponent's hand or fades of the field to the graveyard, you expect. No, this is really good. So when your opponent sends a monster from the hand or deck to the graveyard, so typically like any Orcus deck or Eldritch deck, you can special summon this card from face down to fin. If this card is flipped face up, you can target 2 cards and destroy them. It's a really good deck just for its ability to special summon itself, because I'm pretty sure any deck that wants to send monsters from the hand or deck to the graveyard is typically a really good effect to just get some disruption. But moving on to the spell lineup, I play 2 copies of Twin Twister and 3 copies of Galaxy Cyclone, just because of back removal. I have a lot of back removal already in the deck that can take out Dragon and Axon, but if I'm locked out of monster effects, I need something as spells and traps to destroy them. And then lastly, for the traps, Flip Burst Rebirth is just like a Monster Reborn, but you have to pay life points to special summon a monster and face down. So typically I can activate this, special summon a Shaddoll monster or like any flip monster, and then special summon Intruder because it's a mandatory effect to get some bodies onto the board. And lastly, 1 Shaddoll Core for its genericness, and then 2 Shaddoll Schism. Shaddoll Schism is a new one that just came out in Rise of the Duelist for the ability to fusion summon from the graveyard and then send 1 monster to the graveyard depending on what monster you just summoned. And so that's why I play Shaddoll Core, for the ability to either make like Ab Cologne, Shaddoll Construct, or Shuganaga. So typically I have a way to send send Earth, Light, Dark monsters to the graveyard. If I play like Grista, maybe I will play Grista. Was a reason to like get the ability to send Salamangreat monsters to the graveyard, because of Core allows you to substitute any monster for the ability to fusion summon with it, so it can be treated as a fire monster, so you can special summon like Grista. So it's not a bad card, and also has the ability to special summon itself. But anyway, that is the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please leave a like, and tell me if you want to see more janky decks like this. But anyway, guys, I'll see you guys over the horizon.